Welcome to the March 27th, 2025 episode of The Energy Show. I'm energy journalist Markham Hislop, and today's working title for this episode is Trump's auto tariffs are the greatest gift he could have given to the China's EV industry. The Trump announced yesterday that there are going to be 25% tariffs applied to imports of non-US automobiles, which is a real big problem in Canada because we have, first of all, we manufacture 1.6 autos, but the two industries, the auto industries, are tightly integrated. In Southern Ontario is where the Canadian industry is based. We have a parts industry of approximately 700 suppliers. We have a well-developed, highly skilled supply chain for the Canadian industry. We produce about 1.6 million units a year, and that's, global sales are anywhere from 80 to 90 million. So not a huge number. I think we're 11th largest auto producer in the world. But in this North American context, extremely important, highly integrated into the North American industry. So between Windsor and Detroit, you'll often see auto parts going back and forth 6 to 8 times as part of this. And how does that all get tariffed? It's but here's the that's not the I was well actually I was going to do the show on the impact on the Canadian industry. And you'll see in my interview, which we'll get into in just a moment, with Professor Dimitry Anastakis, who is the L.R. Wilson R.J. Currie Chair in Canadian Business History, University of Toronto. He's an expert on the auto industry. And we got into the issue of how will the Trump's tariffs affect the global auto industry, which has already been highly disrupted. You can go on to our the Energy Media YouTube channel, and you see interviews with Bill Russo or Michael Dunn, who are American EV experts. They've come out of the auto industry, and they're based in China, and the experts on that industry. The rise of China's auto industry in the last 5 or 6 years has completely disrupted the global auto industry. And so there are a number of trends here that we need to be aware of as global context for Trump's tariffs. And one of them is the switch in the industry from internal combustion engine to electric vehicles. Now, last year, the internal combustion engine has actually, as a percentage of sales, internal combustion engine cars went from like 96% in 2019, 2020. Now it's down to about high 70s. And this year, if the projections are hit, internal combustion engine will be only 70% of all the cars that are sold. And China, one of its stated goals, and especially its BYD, which is its big auto manufacturer, have said our goal is to kill the internal combustion engine. We're going to drive the switch to electric vehicles. So first of all, the switch from combustion to electric, that's one huge trend that's affecting the industry. The second is the rise of China. And one of the things that particularly Michael Dunn has said, and you can see it in the video interviews I've done with them, is that the legacy automakers, GM, Ford, Stellantis, the German companies, the Japanese companies, were not prepared. Were completely taken by surprise because there's been talk all through the aughts, that China was going to have this big auto industry. It never happened. And so everybody got complacent. And then when it did happen in 2020, when the growth really, really started in earnest, they didn't have a response. So last year, China's automakers captured 72% of their domestic market. And this year, the forecasts are as high as 96%. I don't think it'll get quite that high. But once you get past 72, I mean, 80, 85, 90, basically the legacy automakers have been kicked out of China, which is important because that's 25 million car autos a year. And now, if let's say we do 90, you're talking about the over, almost a third basically of the global market that's now not available to legacy automakers. That's a huge change. And we see China moving in a big way into the global south, so Africa, Latin America, and Asia, by not only increasing their auto exports, they were up to 6%, or sorry, 6 million units last year. That's a 20% increase. And there are plans to expand it at a rapid clip because they can manufacture 40 million automobiles. That's the manufacturing capacity that they have. Major, major threat. But not only that, they have and this came from the national government in China that gave them direction. They said, build local. So now you see like BYD building plants in China and Turkey and Hungary and Vietnam and all over the place. But it's not just BYD, it's Chery, it's SAIC, because there's probably a dozen or 15 of these Chinese, some of them are EV only, some of them make internal combustion engines, but it's a major onslaught. And what Professor Anastakis made the point is that Trump has just kneecapped the legacy automakers with his tariffs. I don't know how you have to be totally ignorant of the trends going on in the global industry to not have figured out what your tariffs were going to be. This is incredibly incompetent. And Dimitry had some rather pointed comments to make about Trump and his administration. This is going to set back the North American manufacturing industry by years, and it may never recover. The auto industry, particularly the big three, and Tesla, that's a whole story unto itself. This is really big news, folks. And how Canada responds, we talked about that a little bit towards the end of the interview. There aren't a lot of options. I mean, Prime Minister Mark Carney has said that Canada will have a strategy and will work hard to support the industry. But the brutal reality is that this is a tremendous blow to the biggest manufacturing sector in Canada. So anyway, watch. I hope you enjoy this interview. I found Dimitri very knowledgeable, plenty of really interesting insights here, and this is a story that we are going to come back to quite a bit in the next little while. Dimitri, one of the issues that we've examined here at Energy Media quite often is the growth of the Chinese auto manufacturing sector, and it's huge. Out of the 88 or 90 million units a year that autos that are sold globally, China has the capacity to manufacture 40 million, and it's almost pushed the legacy automakers out of the Chinese market entirely. The last thing the industry needs as it adjusts to that new competition is disruption. And it seems to me that that's exactly what Donald Trump has done to even the North American automakers.
Absolutely. This is going to go down as one of the greatest own goals in economic and policy history. This is crazy. As you know, the auto industry is the most competitive and difficult industry in the world in the best of times. When you add in the fact that we're trying to make this transition from an ICE to an EV future, and then you've got to face a competition like China, which is already so far along, to turn around and disrupt and insert so much chaos into the North American sector at a moment when, the legacy manufacturers like Ford and General Motors and Stellantis are just trying to catch up it's asinine. It is so ludicrous to actually impose this kind of level of chaos and uncertainty on an industry that's already struggling. So I keep saying to anybody who'll listen that Trump is going to shoot the fourth industrial revolution in the head when it comes to the United States and its ability to catch up to the rest of the world. And, it's just kind of mind-boggling that any leader who has, imposed this would be willing to do this to their own industry. And that's what he's doing. He's not attacking other industries. He's really attacking his own industry.
Yeah, I mean, one of the signs of disruption in the auto industry is not just market share, and we should point out that the Chinese market is about 25 million autos a year, and last year they had Chinese manufacturers at 73%. This year, I've heard estimates as high as 96%. And when Joe Biden put on the EV tariffs last year at 100%, Canada followed in September. What I argued at the time was that all that did was take China and funnel it into the global south, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, the very place that everybody has been looking is looking to the future for growth, including the oil industry and the other auto sectors. I mean, if you wanted to help your competitor, what Biden did and now what Trump has done is as pro-China a move as you could make.
Now, I'll say this much. This is a playbook that's been used before. It was used in the 80s to try to encourage the Japanese to cut back on the number of imports into North America and build some capacity in North America. And, those EV tariffs on Chinese vehicles were really designed to give the North American makers some breathing room so that they could get back in the game and, develop a level of competition so that they could actually match the Chinese. But you're right. The long term of this is external tariffs on the Chinese in North America may give the North American manufacturers a little bit of breathing room, but it certainly opens up the rest of the market globally for the Chinese to increase their influence and sell more vehicles. I mean, this is the worst of all worlds in some ways. North American consumers don't get the benefit of cheap EVs or the competition that cheap EVs would bring to accelerate this transition, and it puts the manufacturers behind in some ways and allows the Chinese to really advance in other markets. Europe is also imposing EVs on Chinese vehicles as well, but are doing so in a little bit more of a way. There has been some Chinese penetration into the European market.
Yeah, and Chinese manufacturers, auto manufacturers like BYD are setting up factories in places like Hungary and Turkey to get into the European market. So they're already now. Here's something: the Chinese automakers are very strategic. They're very good at what they do. They're producing cars at low cost that are reasonably, reliable and high consumer. I've interviewed Michael Dunn, who's a former GM executive, and Bill Russo, who's another former legacy automaker. Yeah, and both of them have said emphatically that the legacy automakers, when weren't ready for the Chinese onslaught, they're completely discombobulated. They're scrambling. They don't know what to do about getting market share back. And so it would appear that while the Chinese are very well prepared for this tariff war, the legacy automakers are not. And now instead of focusing on what they need to focus on, they're scrambling around trying to respond to Trump's tariffs.
Yeah, yeah, it's again, it's madness in the sense that you mentioned the EV tariffs on Chinese manufactured cars that come in, but one of the things that Biden did do, which was pretty smart, was the IRA measures in terms of pushing a lot of American investment towards those manufacturers in terms of building infrastructure, providing the kind of support to accelerate that shift. And Trump's statements, his rhetoric, some of his measures are really eroding that capacity. So we have, again, the worst of all worlds. Instead of being a kind of a strong support of EV manufacturing in North America, you get this chaos of tariffs, which not only hurts EVs in the future, but it hurts the industry itself. I mean, I mention this often. It seems to have gone under the radar. A few weeks ago, Ford announced that it was going to delay the next generation F-150 because of all the chaos around tariffs that Trump has created. So it's not just hurting the EV rollout, it's hurting the very manufacturers and the very manufacturing base that Trump is supposedly trying to protect and support.
Let's talk about Biden's Inflation Reduction Act because there was a tremendous amount of capital that flowed, and not one of the good things about the IRA is it took a little bit of government money to crowd in private capital. And
Yeah.
there has been like $100 billion or more invested in just battery factories alone in the
Yep.
US and EV manufacturing plants on top of that. So what the North Americans seem to forget is that China absolutely owns battery supply chains. Absolutely owns from the critical minerals that they've sourced in other countries to the smelting and refining and making battery metals. All of that capacity, 75 to 95% of it, is in China. So Canada was going to play a very big role in the US strategy because we have all those critical
Yeah.
minerals.
Yeah.
And now Trump has basically just shot that strategy in the foot.
Yes, it's amazing to me. Again, the greatest own goal in economic history. And I'm a historian. I think about in the 1950s, Canada supplied a ton of critical minerals, critical resources to help fuel the American economy. And we wanted to make sure that we were partners in this, and we were partners in this. At the very moment that America needs its allies like Canada to have that option of critical minerals, the kind of access to the ability to manufacture these vehicles, it's now building borders, building border walls. And not just that, it's offending, attacking, and really, putting Canada in such a position where we have to raise our arms to fight back. This is the exact opposite moment and the exact opposite approach to take.
I yes, that almost seems so self-evident. You can't. It's hard to believe why the Trump White House hasn't figured this out yet. But let's talk about Canada because you brought that up. We have a fairly, I think we have the 11th largest auto manufacturing sector in the world. We make about 1.6 million autos. We buy about 2 million, 2.2 million. And a lot of it is in Ontario. And what we forget is that the supply chains, all of those tool and die makers and, the auto parts man, there's 700 companies in Ontario alone that do that kind of work. What's going to be the effect of these tariffs on that industry?
It could be disastrous. I mean, it's a strategic advantage that we have. It's part of the specialization of the North American sector. I mean, Trump keeps saying that he could just move those plants over here and that they can make them. They can't make them because there's some specializations in Canada, whether it's tool and die mold manufacturers, whether it's aluminum production, that you cannot do in the States. You can't replicate this in the States. So these tariffs are going to have such a tremendous negative impact. And even if they are removed, the uncertainty caused by this, the chaos caused by this, it means that people aren't going to invest. They're not going to be able to make the kind of investments that will be forward future facing, but they're also going to basically chill the entire sector to the point where you're going to start, and you've already started seeing layoffs across the board. Again, the word that I have been using to describe this is madness. It's beyond chaos because chaos can be an unintended consequence, but this is actually a planned attempt to really destroy, in some ways, destroy the North American industry. I'm shocked at the UAW coming out in support
I
of these
know, right?
25% tariffs because at some point soon there are going to be layoffs in the United States. The industry, it's so, as you already pointed out, it's so integrated with stuff going back and forth across the border. Stop thinking of it as two or three different industries. Start thinking of it as one. Trump can't see beyond that, and we're going to see the implications and repercussions of this, and it's not going to be good.
No, it's going to be really ugly. Now,
I
Prime
hope I'm
Minister
wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that cooler heads prevail, but it doesn't seem to be that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney has talked about how Canada is going to step up for the Canadian auto sector. What are his options?
Well, there's not a lot that you can do in the current state besides providing some immediate support. I mean, he announced a $2 billion strategic fund to provide relief, but this is going to require, if these tariffs go through and stay in the way that they're intended to stay, this is going to require a major rethinking of how the auto industry works. There's a lot of capital investment already in Canada, billions of dollars. It's very difficult for these automakers to walk away from that. So there may be an opportunity to shift. Maybe this idea of starting to really make greater connections with Europe, that might be an opportunity there. I mean, there's so much investment that's been promised in Canada by these manufacturers. I know that the government is very keen to make sure that these manufacturers maintain their commitments, but who knows? I mean, if you have a plant like the Toyota facility in Cambridge, where 80 or 90% of your vehicles are earmarked for the United States, where are you going to send those cars? How are you going to deal with this? So this is going to require pretty close cooperation between government and industry to figure things out. And in the immediate, there may be a room for some relief in terms of support, like during COVID because it's equivalent to COVID, but this is going to require a longer term strategy in terms of where does Canada fit? Because we have these advantages in terms of a great workforce, already invested capital, all these critical minerals. I mean, there's a reason that Honda, before Trump came in, said that they were going to spend $15 billion to create an entire life cycle development for EVs in Canada because it's a great place to build these cars. But once you have these tariffs in it, it changes the dynamic entirely. So it's going to take a lot of work.
And there's one other thing that we should talk about, and that is one of Canada's biggest competitive advantages when we're talking about attracting investment in manufacturing and making our existing manufacturers more competitive is our power sector. We have one of the cleanest, most reliable, low-cost power grids in the world, 84% clean already, and some of the cheapest power in the world. It already is the basis for our aluminum industry. It supported our steel industry, all of which go into automobiles. And the US does not have that. Their
Yeah.
costs are much higher and they're much dirtier, and they're going to lose that advantage.
Yeah, it was one of the reasons that Honda made that statement and announced that investment because they said, one of the things is this is, the cleanest form of energy and the cleanest life cycle that you can find just about anywhere. This is a huge comparative advantage for us. And, Trump could have taken advantage of that, but instead he's squandering it. We're aware of this. During the provincial election campaign in Ontario, the government was running all kinds of ads that talked about Ontario's role as a clean energy source for the EV rollout. There were all these great ads about how amazing Ontario can be as a place to build EVs and to build cars. That is, an advantage that we see that seems to have no impact upon the Trump administration, but the auto manufacturers understand just how important it can be. From aluminum right through to assembly, it's a huge way of thinking about the future and a cleaner future. It's such a shame because, like I said, it's a squandered opportunity that is so unnecessary. Absolutely a gun to their own head in terms of what they're doing to their own industry.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, all the work that we've done at Energy Media over the last 5 years over the auto industry, because it's tied to the energy sector so tightly. 45% of oil demand comes from ground transport.
Yeah.
That so it's very tightly integrated there, and so disruption in one leads to disruption in the other. And one of the things, so now the industry, as facing Chinese competition in both internal combustion engine and EVs, the industry itself across the board understands that electric is the future. So now, on top of all of that disruption, competition, new technologies, now it has trade disruption.
Yeah.
China has none of that.
No. Hey, when I saw this announcement, the fact that they were going to go through with this on automotive, I said to myself, they're popping champagne in Beijing because the United States hobbled its own industry without the Chinese having to lift a finger. And, there's a very good chance that in 10 and 15 years, we're all going to be driving Chinese-made EVs, whether they're made in China or elsewhere in the world, because this is a pivot moment. It's a paradigm shifting moment, and I don't know how the industry is able to recover from this when they're already facing such incredible burdens to begin with. I always tell the story that in 1978, a bunch of Chinese dignitaries came to Ontario to visit the Oshawa Autoplex because at that time in the 1970s, Oshawa was building so many vehicles. And it was so clear that's what the Chinese wanted. They wanted an auto industry that was just like ours. They have it now, and for no reason, no sensible reason, Trump and the measures that they're imposing are really going to effectively destroy the North American sector. We had a chance with the IRA and the rollout and those investments that you mentioned, which are basically on hold now. But that's effectively, who knows what's going to happen with that.
Okay, is there an opportunity here for the Canadian government to work with industry leaders, the parts sector, the manufacturers, whoever else needs to be at the table, and say, look, we know that we have critical minerals, which means that you start with minerals, and then you smelt it and refine it into battery metals, and then the battery metals go into cells, and the cells go into packs. That's basically how it works. That since that supply chain is in China, boom, we could put a lot of investment into that, build that out here in Canada, and that then becomes, because we already have investment in battery plants, Volkswagen, and there's been some announcements. Take that then battery advantage and use it to lever the the switch in Canada to an EV manufacturing sector. Accelerate that maybe faster than it goes. Then we have the option to not only supply Canada, but maybe we have the option to supply Europe, maybe some Latin America, other countries like that. Is that approach a reasonable one?
That may be possible. It's going to take tremendous investment. And, the federal and provincial governments have already promised, $50 billion in investment to leverage that kind of additional investment from places like VW or Stellantis with the LG plant in Windsor. So it's already happening. We could accelerate it, but it's all premised on this idea of having easy access to the US market. So, yes, we could get there. The Canadian market is probably not big enough. It is not big enough to sustain this kind of investment. So, you're going to have to look elsewhere. But that in itself is very costly. I mean, I hate to say it, but, I don't know if some of these investments go forward, even if the government wants to hold the companies to account. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's unprofitable, it's unprofitable. And, we live in a pretty harsh capitalist system, and the auto industry is at the very apex of that. So, like you said, adding all this uncertainty doesn't help the bottom line, but it is going to be a very difficult road to be able to shift away from a North American oriented industry where Canada plays a pretty important role to an elsewise oriented industry. If it's possible, it can be done, perhaps, but it's going to take years. It's going to be very costly, and who knows whether it can be done. The sad thing of all about this, Markham, is this is so unnecessary. If Trump had done nothing and just allowed the IRA measures to roll out, if he had just done nothing, the United States auto industry, of which Canada is a major part, and the North American industry would have had a real fighting chance to catch up. Now, I don't see that happening.
Two comments just to wrap up the interview. One is I've had Kingsmill Bond, who was at the Rocky Mountain Institute, on the show, and he has said, look, yes, China has a lead now. This is a long race. And the other competitors, like North America, are going to compete hard for their share of the global auto market. So that's one. Dr. Torsten Jackert, who's an economist at the University of British Columbia, was on about a month ago, and he said, the only thing worse than tariffs is uncertainty.
Yep.
And so what Trump has done is include both of those.
Both.
It's a double
Both.
whammy, tariffs, and now he's made uncertainty so that investment won't come here.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is, I agree with you absolutely. Tariffs and uncertainty are worse. There's no investment. All that investment that was going to be leveraged out of the IRA, about 50 billion has been spent, about 50 billion is on hold, and about 50 billion probably won't appear. The sad thing is, we haven't even mentioned Tesla, which is the leading American EV manufacturer. And, that's a whole sideline story where you have Elon Musk destroying a brand single-handedly in a way that is like setting billions of dollars on fire. I mean, he's almost like the Joker with his own company, where he's destroyed more brand equity than anybody I can imagine in business history, to be honest with you. And, that was one place where the Americans actually had a kind of a leading champion. If you look at their numbers in Europe, in outside of North America, even in North America, I mean, there's protests at Tesla dealerships. How badly do you have to screw yourself up to not only destroy the industry, but you have the CEO of your leading firm has gotten to the point where he is being vilified as a Nazi, and no one wants to buy his cars. It's just madness. We're in this kind of never ever ending world of it's just stupidity. And I always say, and I know this is going to sound ludicrous, but I always say, if we have to be stuck on Trump's version of Earth in the multiverse, at least let me have the Toronto Maple Leafs win the Stanley Cup. I mean, come on, let's balance things off just a tiny little bit here. And I know that's coming from a Toronto person, but hey.
Oh, Dimitri,
It's just so ludicrous what we're going through here and so unnecessary.
the Calgary Flames are going to win the cup before the Leafs. I hate to break it to you, but that's the way it's going to be. Or the Oilers.
Yeah, we'll
Honor
see.
McDavid is due. But look, the I it's hard to wrap this up because the this is such a gigantic story and there's so many layers to it. But I wanted to make this point about Tesla. The only non-China Chinese EV maker that the Chinese auto industry respects is Tesla.
Yeah,
They've said their technology is top notch, their software is top notch. They have a lead in those areas, and the Chinese say that's the one we worry about. Hyundai, GM, Ford, yeah, we don't worry about it. It's Tesla. So there, as you point out, North America had its EV champion, and between Trump and the CEO of Tesla,
yeah,
they're destroying that champion.
yeah.
It's a head scissors.
It's just hard to believe. It is actually hard to believe. It's tragic. It's sad. It's unnecessary. The bad thing is, Markham, is that this is going to have an impact on ordinary people. Costs are going to go up. Inflation is going to go up. We're already effectively in a recession because of these tariffs. Who knows? I keep saying to people, by June and July, we'll know whether this is a recession in North America, a recession globally, a Great Depression, another Great Depression, because that's what's at stake here. There's so much that can go wrong now in terms of the economy because of these measures that, like I keep saying, are completely unnecessary. If you just let things roll out, we would have had a fighting chance and we could have had a booming 20s. Like the earlier 1920s, which was a roaring 20s in part because of the auto industry. We could have had another booming 20s because of EV and EV uptake. And now that's been stillborn effectively in the United States.
Oh my goodness, we were just starting to run the race and then we shot ourselves in one foot and now we've shot ourselves in the other foot
Yep.
and yeah. Well, look,
Strangled in the grave by an insane megalomaniac narcissist. I keep saying, when is the rest of America going to stand up and say, "Stop the madness"? You are going to destroy your own economy. I don't get it. Hey, perhaps I'm wrong, and this magically resolves itself by having all these car companies suddenly appear and walking away from other investments, but I doubt it. I doubt it pretty highly.
I would agree. Dimitri, thank you very much for this. We are going to have you back on to talk about Tesla. That is the story all by itself.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Markham. Great.
Thanks for watching the show. We are on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers and over 1 million views. If you're enjoying the content, give us a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for being part of our community.